Good morning and welcome to How to Manage Emotions in the Workplace. I see we have a few people live with us now, so as I've said, good morning, you're very welcome. I'm just going to give it maybe another 30 seconds just to let anybody that's registered join the event before we get started. Good morning, Lisa. Am I in the right place? I hope you are. Lovely to hear from you. I can't see you, but it's lovely to know that you're there. And not only that Lisa is there, but good morning for those of you that are attending these webinars for the first time. And welcome back to those of you that have become real regulars to these webinars. And it's so nice to know that you feel that those are valuable and that you're coming back. Good morning, Stephen. Good morning, Tori. Lovely to hear from you. Don't worry about dropping out. Those of you that have attended these webinars before with Crowdcast will know that the great thing about this facility is that the webinar is recorded as soon as we go live. So we're live and we are recording. And that the webinar, for those of you who either can't make it or have to drop out, will be available immediately after we have finished the webinar. So that's one of the great things about using Crowdcast. Good morning, Gillian. Welcome back. Great to hear from you. Okay, so I said I would give it another 20 seconds. It's 10:02, and as we're only here for 60 minutes, I'm going to get started. So those of you that have been here before, you will know that I'm going to do some screen sharing now. And so today we are here to talk about managing emotions in the workplace. And just some of the housekeeping, I suppose, before we get started. And that's for those of you that are new to Crowdcast. Just some simple instructions in terms of using it. I think those of you that are here have already got started in terms of the chat box, which is just brilliant. In terms of the chat box and the webinars that I am providing, I do love them to be interactive. So please feel free to get involved and get your thoughts down in the chat box. I will be asking a variety of questions today. And this session really only works if you get involved, so I'd appreciate your input. What you'll see at the bottom of the screen, you'll see the number of people attending and registered and those that are here. There's also a section for polls. I'm not running any polls this morning, but those of you that have questions, please put them in the Ask a Question. What we will see as we go through the session, the chat box will become quite lively. And if there's a really important question that you have, there might be a possibility that I will miss it as I am asking questions and people are putting in the answers. So anything that you would really like me to answer, include it here and ask a question. And then I will get to that at the end of the webinar. What you'll see at the very bottom of your screen then as well is a get in touch. Any of you that find the session this morning useful and you want to get in touch to find out about what you could do in your own workplace in terms of managing emotions, please use that to book your 30-minute call. And at the bottom left of the screen, what you have is a 15-second clip moment. So those of you that frequently use social media and like people to know what you're getting up to, at any point during the session, you can record, you can get access to that 15-second clip, and you can share that on social media. So that's another great feature of Crowdcast. Just before we get started into the content of this morning, just for those people again who are joining us for the first time, again, that may be people watching on demand because there are a variety of new names on the registration list this morning. So my name is Julie Allen of Julie Allen Consulting, and I have been a business improvement specialist for over 20 years. The key areas that I provide support to workplaces currently are on improving psychological flexibility. So I'm a certified ACT trainer and a matrix facilitator with Dr. Kevin Polk, the creator of the ACT Matrix. You'll be hearing about that later. I also help create psychologically safe spaces to work in. Some of that really comes in what we're talking about this morning. It's really hard not to. So I'm a certified pro-social matrix facilitator again with Dr. Kevin Polk. Also, I help individuals, mostly people in leadership roles, develop their emotional intelligence. And I'm licensed to use the Thomas International TQ, the Trait Emotional Intelligence Questionnaire. Some of you joining this morning will already have participated in that feedback report and feedback session. And the other piece that I do, that I've been doing for years and years, is helping organizations with their strategic direction, considering their vision, their purpose, and their values, and their strategic priorities. You may think that's something that's just tagged on at the end, but actually I consider all of these things to be of equal importance and also very much connected. So that's a little bit about me. You're here to find out a little bit more about managing emotions in the workplace. So that's just exactly where we're going to get started now. So really, if we think about it, well, why are we here? Why are we talking about this? And why do emotions matter? Well, first of all, emotions matter because in the workplace, those of you joining me this morning are human. Not only are you human, but the people that you work with are human. And the things about human is they are emotional creatures. And we are emotional creatures because from an evolutionary perspective, humans have been designed, as animals have the fight or flight response as well, different in humans in that we have, when the fight or flight is triggered, we will experience emotions, but also we'll experience other emotions outside of the fight or flight response. So we are emotional creatures. We have feelings. And gone are the days, some of you will often heard me say that, you know, it's kind of leave all your baggage at the front door and come to work and just put on a great face and get on with it. And really, people are humans. If we think about what's happened in the last 14 months, it's been a pretty tough time for a lot of people. So we can't ignore that. Emotional intelligence is critical in the 21st century. I think that the little quote I have here particularly relates to that. You know, so in the past, you know, it was all about muscle. It was about the production line and speed. You know, then it was about brains. But the future of the workplace is all about heart, and heart comes with the feelings. And so emotional intelligence as well does give organizations a competitive advantage. What we know from the research out there is that those organizations that have leaders or people with high levels of emotional intelligence also have higher levels of ideas generation, creativity, and success. We know it absolutely impacts on the bottom line. So that is why we are having the conversation here today. So this is where I'd like to hear a little bit from you. I'd like to know now this morning, why are you here? Why do you want to know about emotions in the workplace and managing them? What's going on at the moment that might have caused you to click the Save My Spot button for this Crowdcast webinar? Why are you here? What would you like to get from this? So I'd like to hear from you this morning, just before I proceed any further, and hopefully then what I can do is weave that in. So just giving a few minutes here for anybody brave enough to just use the chat box to tell me Why are you here? Brilliant. Thank you, Gillian. Finding ways to support people coming back from furlough. Okay, great. So furlough is one of those things. Emotions are high, people are exhausted, coronavirus has impacted on everyone. I want to make sure that as a lead in the organisation that I'm sensitive and aware to the challenges. Okay, great, excellent, thank you. So furlough, keywords here, sensitive, great. Okay, so you're moving to a remote first model. It'll be critical for us to emotional connection. Great, okay. We only come together physically from time to time. Tori, thank you for getting involved. Changes in society, yes, particularly COVID. Stephen has changed how you connect with your team remotely rather than in person. Absolutely. So we've talked about the last 14 months that has caused some major changes in the workplace. We need to consider how we will deal and adapt. And also managing emotions in the workplace. What you'll see fairly soon is we also have to talk about you as leaders and your own emotions, because sometimes we have a tendency to talk about those other people around us within the team. However, that also means that we have emotions and we need to consider what those are and how we're responding to them. Okay, so this slide now just highlights some of the most common workplace emotions for managers. So you all talked about the objectives for you being about the team and exhaustion. But first of all, I'm going to start with managers. So this is a survey pre-COVID that was conducted by an organisation called Office 5. So the most common manager workplace emotions were anger and defensiveness within this survey. So it was asking managers some of those most common emotions that they experience: frustration and loss of patience, stress and anxiety, and self-doubt and insecurity. So tell me, maybe again, if you're willing and if you're brave, in the chat box, maybe if you could share with me, what might you be feeling in recent times, in the last 2 weeks as a manager? What are some of the emotions that you have been experiencing? Do these resonate with you? Are these some of the experiences that you've had over the last couple of weeks? Maybe the stress and anxiety of not being in contact with your team as regularly, making contact with them in different ways. Great, we've got the chat box going again. So self-doubt, yeah. Am I doing okay? Am I helping others? Am I supporting others? Or am I creating more stress? Thank you for being brave, Lisa. So yes, I think what Lisa is saying really does then resonate with this list. Yeah, and Stephen, thank you again for being brave. So we as leaders, as managers in organizations, we are human also, and we are bound to have these different feelings and experiences. It is natural and it is normal, and I would be more concerned if you didn't have those feelings. So a feeling of, Tori, yes, feeling overwhelmed and anxious for others and difficult to gauge how more introvert people are feeling. Are they sharing those experiences? So yes, so here we've got some of the common workplace emotions that you may be experiencing. What we also have here is, here are some of the triggers then for those emotions in the workplace. So why do those occur? Well, again, we might find that first of all, it's the pressure that you put on yourself as a manager to perform, to support your employees. And that will come as a cost at times for yourself. Difficult situations with your employees, they may be their situations. It may be difficult situations with your own line manager. So your line manager may have difficulties. It may be the relationship between you and your line manager, or the relationship between you and your employees, and also difficult situations with other managers. So those are the different triggers associated with those workplace emotions. The workplace emotions, particularly for you as leaders. And also what I have is here is a list of just some emotional workplace situations, some examples. So again, some of these may resonate with you as examples of situations that you've had to deal with that have caused both emotions with you and also with your employees. So poor performance triggering anger and resentment. So that particular one we can look at from a variety of different perspectives. So poor performance triggering anger from yourself, perhaps as the leader, anger around why they are not performing well, resentment perhaps from team members in terms of why are they performing poorly and why are they getting away with it? Just looking at the different ways different people might look at these different situations. Negative feedback with employees or even yourselves as leaders may get defenses up every time. The difficulty with that as well is when we get our defenses up and maybe considering our response to those, then sometimes we stop the feedback because we don't like the response that we get as a result of that. And those of you that have attended some of my other webinars, particularly on psychological safety, then silence in organizations is a dangerous place to be. So what we don't want people to do is to shut down emotions and to respond to emotions in a way that they just avoid those situations and stay silent. That's just not going to be helpful. Feeling insecure in your own capabilities then triggers stress in yourself and also in members of the team. Unclear expectations from those in management can trigger cynicism. So, unclear expectations could be perhaps they're holding back. So creating feelings then of mistrust. Could be they don't know what they're doing. So uncertainty then perhaps is being felt. Another example then that we have is those emotional situations is an employee's constant negative attitude triggers real frustration, and frustration then can spill into anger. So even talking about some of those different workplace situations that, in effect, all 5 of those could be happening in your organization at one time. Put all of those feelings and emotions together, and that's really going to create an environment that maybe doesn't feel the greatest place to be. And one of the things that I would like you to be thinking about is, are we creating workplaces that are enabling your people in your teams to bring their very best selves to work? And if we're not doing that, then what can we do about that? And this is where now what I've done is just a few simple slides around what might be showing up in terms of emotions and how we might deal with those. So Gillian, fears around job security. Thank you, particularly in light of COVID. So yes, I think a lot of people really fearful at the moment about job security, fearful about the changes that might need to occur. I think fearful of we may never go back to working with our colleagues in the workplace 5 days a week. For some, that will cause great concern. So other feelings, emotions, I suppose we could also talk about isolation. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take some of what you've been telling me and we're going to use that using then the ACT matrix. So those of you that have joined the webinars before, you'll know that what I'm trying to do is to help you to understand both the ACT matrix and the pro-social matrix, and also then not to understand those, but to be able to use those with members of your team. And doing that, using the ACT matrix will help you to understand yourself better, and the pro-social matrix then is help you to understand members of your team better. To do that, what I'm going to do now is just to explain the ACT matrix to you. So when we use the ACT matrix, first of all, what I'm sharing with you now is the experiencing line. The experiencing line at the top of the matrix starts with the 5 senses experiencing, the external world that we live in. So first of all, what we do is we experience in the external world what we experience through those 5 senses. So that is what we hear, what we see, what we can taste, what we can touch, what we can smell. So we experience there, and when we experience there, that flows through us. So when we see things or hear things, for an example, that will flow through us, and that creates feelings, thoughts, images, and memories, sensations, urges in the internal world. So we start to experience internally. So for example, we hear what colleagues are saying. We hear what our line manager is saying to us. We then understand or we perceive what is being said, and that then will create lots of thoughts and feelings inside. That may also take us to not perhaps even be fully listening to what is now being said because we're in the internal world. The one thing about navigating through life is we need to experience both the internal world and the external world. The internal world is great for us, it protects us from danger. The internal world at the bottom of the matrix is really the amygdala in the brain as well, so that's helping to detect any threats. But what's important is that we know and we notice when we are in the internal world and the external world. Because what is happening is when we experience in the internal world, quite often, we see those as real live events. We spend a lot of time in the internal world thinking and feeling instead of experiencing in the external world and really experiencing life. So the ACT matrix starts, first of all, with the experiencing line. Then we move into the behavioural line. Those of you that have joined us before, you'll know that what we consider here is, first of all, for those of you that haven't experienced this before, is an away move. An away move is, what do I do that moves me away from what is important, both in the experiencing, in the external world and in the internal world. And also then we have is what moves me towards what is important in the internal world and in the external world. And then when we join those two lines together, then what we have in the middle here is the importance of noticing when I'm in the internal world, noticing when I'm in the external world, and noticing if I'm moving away or towards. And the key word is noticing. Noticing and having that awareness of. It is not about judging. So we're asking you to do this from a non-judgmental and compassionate viewpoint. That's the tricky bit. Noticing without scolding yourself. Noticing without telling yourself off. So it's simply noticing. That's an away move or that's a towards. When we make judgments, then we start to get into that vicious cycle then of perhaps beating ourselves up about that. So we're trying to look at using the matrix to step back and to notice from a distance about what's going on. What are we actually doing? And what I'm going to do today now is I'm going to use the ACT matrix from the point of view of managing emotions in the workplace. We can use the ACT matrix from any perspective, because what we're doing is we're using this as a framework to solve some issues or problems that we might have. In this case, it's about managing emotions in the workplace. So most of you that are attending the webinar, I can see from some of the chat already, and knowing some of you are leaders of teams. So what I'd like to ask here, first of all, in terms of demonstrating the ACT matrix, is tell me who is important to you in terms of managing emotions in the workplace. Who are the important people? So this is where I'd like you to get involved in the chat box. I will populate the ACT matrix to achieve your objectives of attending this webinar using the ACT matrix, and then I'm going to take it up a step further. So who are the important people? So first of all, I'm going to get us started with work colleagues. So my team, myself. So this is important. The leadership team, the board. Okay, great, excellent. Now that we have a list and some examples of who and what is important, of who is important, what I want to find out from you now is what is important to you in terms of managing emotions in the workplace. What is important to you? So the whole team, one team, but also everybody outside the team. Okay, so the one team I'm hearing here, I think, Tori, so teamwork in the one team is important. Okay, so yeah, family and friends, because if you're better able to deal with this, then you'll have a better home and personal life. Important right now, affecting emotions, conflicting priorities. Okay, so Lisa is people can share safely. Okay, so safety is important. How they're feeling heard and supported. So heard and supported is what is important to you as leaders. What else is important to you as leaders in terms of managing emotions? So I think even if I go back and just come through the chat box here, so that you show concern, which is back to the heard and supported. I think what you're trying to do is what's important is leadership, that you are leading by example, and just coming, so ensuring people feel okay, so comfortable, Mickey, thank you, and perhaps being able to lead by example. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so in managing emotions in the workplace, what I'd like you to be doing, you can have a copy of this matrix, draw it on a sheet in front of you now, and think about yourself in your own workplace, because this is back to what is important to you. Why am I here? Why am I attending this webinar? What is really important to me in terms of managing emotions in the workplace? The other one I suppose that I might put here is harmony. So what's so important to you is that there is harmony in the workplace. So now that we've considered who and what's important to us, in terms of what I've previously explained, it is this box is in the internal world, because it is you saying this is what is important to me and who is important to me, and that's in the internal world. So it's you noticing what's important. And for example, I suppose there's another one in terms of managing emotions that's just showing up for me is calmness. Calmness may be something that might be important to you. So everybody's different. Everybody joining us today will be different and have different thoughts and opinions. So what I want you to do is really think about now for yourself, what is important for you in terms of managing emotions. This is you as the leader, you as an individual, because the ACT matrix deals with me, I, nobody else. So if we then move into the bottom left of the matrix in the internal experiencing, we are saying what unwanted stuff shows up inside you. You, the leader today that's here wanting to manage emotions in the workplace. So if we think about, I think some of those things that you've already told me, what's been showing up for you is feeling overwhelmed, anxious, stressed, self-doubt. What else might be showing up for you now? that as a leader you'd prefer not to experience. So what emotions are showing up for you? Again, using the chat box, love to hear from you. I'm just going through the chat box to pick out some of the other feelings that you maybe have already popped in the chat box. Okay, so I think I've got most of those. You know, if I come back to what was in the office vibe survey again, so there may be anger, there may be resentment, and I suppose tiredness, feeling tired, feeling a little depressed on occasions, feeling lonely. So those are, those are some of the things that you might be worried. Thank you. Feeling worried. So here are some of the feelings that you as leaders might be experiencing. And that also is going to impact on the team. So one of the things about leadership is leading by example. Behavior breeds behavior. So how you behave is what you're going to be getting. Helpless. Okay, I think that struck a chord. I'm not laughing at the helpless, but I'm laughing at the fact that, I think once we know that we're brave enough to put something in the chat box, what we'll find is many of us are feeling the same. So here we've got quite a list now of what we are feeling as leaders. Now, what I want to do is to find out from you now again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to write this down. So brave and courageous is one of the things in terms of managing emotions in the workplace that is important, because you're taking those brave steps today. You're talking about how you're feeling in the chat box with, for some of them, they may be complete strangers. Now, what I'm going to ask you to do, for those of you that have been here before, I'm going to ask you to tell me when that unwanted stuff shows up, when you're feeling helpless, you're feeling worried, you're feeling self-doubt, and you're maybe feeling uncomfortable. What do you do to move away from those things? So in the workplace, what would I see you doing when you're feeling overwhelmed, anxious, self-doubt showing up, anger, resentment, feeling tired, depressed, lonely? What might I see you doing? So while I'm waiting on you in the chat box, I'm going to jot down a few things that I would see in organisations when those things show up. First of all, I would say avoiding situations. It will go away. Hopefully it will go away. Let's just give it a little bit of time, and hopefully everything will settle. So sometimes we avoid situations and conversations. And sometimes we have emotional outbursts. So sometimes it just gets so bad that it flows out. It comes out of our mouths. It could be because in the top left of the matrix here, the question for me is, and for you, what would we see or hear you doing when you're feeling tired, you're feeling angry, you're feeling depressed, or self-doubt is showing up? You're feeling a lack of confidence, you're feeling overwhelmed. So you might avoid situations and conversations. There may be some emotional outbursts. We might withdraw. Great. Make lists. Okay, brilliant. Make lists. Always good to make the lists on something else. Go quiet to give space to think. Okay, so withdraw and space to think. Also, what we might find happens as well is you might have fallouts and disagreements with people when those things show up, and you might also vent frustration to other colleagues. Unrealistic optimism. Okay, so voicing So this is about, you know, the reminder in the top left of the matrix. What would I see or hear you doing? So voicing unrealistic optimism. Great. Okay. Hoping it will all work out for itself. And that in itself can become frustrating for people in the team. So, you know, that kind of, guys, like, it'll be all right, it's all going to work out. Voicing that sense of optimism when people don't really believe it and know it's not the case, that's not going to be particularly helpful. So again, if you've got that blank sheet of paper in front of you with a matrix, jotting down for yourself, what would I see or hear you doing when you're experiencing those unwanted emotions? Or I've just listed some emotions here, but one of the things that goes in the bottom left as well is the thoughts. Thinking about the self-talk. What is the unwanted self-talk that you hear? I'm not going to ask you to share that in the chat box, but please feel free to write it down on that blank sheet of paper that you have in front of you. Okay, and just again, in terms of you as a leader now, what I'd like to do is to find out, what could you do? So what behaviours or actions could you do that would move you towards who and what is important? So what could I see you doing now in terms of you as a leader managing your own emotions in the workplace? So one of the things that I'm going to start with here for you is to develop emotional literacy. So emotional literacy is about being able to identify the emotions that are showing up in both yourself and in others. So it is the ability, so recognize the difference between feelings and facts, Tori, absolutely. So it is, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use ACT language here just in terms of that. So for what I would be saying here is notice the internal and external experiencing and notice the difference. So the emotional literacy, what it's about developing that is noticing, naming and understanding emotions. I know what I mean there. I'll leave that off the end. So recognizing the difference between the feelings and facts. What am I hearing? What am I seeing? What am I feeling? So the difference there between the internal and the external worlds. So really trying to develop your emotional literacy is going to be key. Using time for you to use the ACT matrix and develop that skill of noticing it in yourself, first of all, before you move to other people. And one of the things also I would say in terms of, you know, the feeling of overwhelmed is, sorry, let me just see, there we go. Feeling overwhelmed is take time out. I think one of the things that I'm noticing as well is the need for leave and breaks and boundaries. So if I could see everybody, I might, at the moment, I think, see a few heads nodding. So at the moment, now that everybody's not traveling to work, you don't have the downtime before perhaps you leave work, do you get home? So lines become blurred. You work through the travel time, and that's for you to decide what you do. I'm not making any judgments. But what I'm saying is, if you want to manage the emotions in the workplace, that starts with yourself. It starts with looking after yourself. So we might say, even we might add in the self-care. We might add in self-care. Also, what we might do as well is, also is as an individual, is to be honest how we are feeling. And as a leader as well, if you're going to manage the emotions in your team, it's about conducting check-ins. Now, when I talk about conducting check-ins, is it likely at the moment that the check-ins that you would have with your people Are they occurring more frequently or less frequently than they would have been before? Or do you find yourself getting caught up in all the work that you have to do, that those are getting pushed aside? Much more frequently now. Okay, so in managing the emotions, remember, this matrix is about me as an individual, me as the leader. And in conducting those check-ins, also we need to develop our emotional literacy here, asking people how they're feeling and listening to what they say. So when we ask people how they feel and they say they're fine, that's not necessarily a feeling. So it's about probing a little bit more. So yeah, they were really regular, then stood back, and so less regular, now scheduled in and more structured. So great. But working remotely, we miss all the non-verbal signs, and that is definitely the problem with the remote working. We miss those non-verbal clues and observations. So this means that you have to ask questions as leaders, is ask meaningful questions and listen. So, what I would suggest you're doing is that you make some questions, you make a list of questions that you're going to ask people, really finding out where people are at. You can do that on an individual basis, and believe it or not, you can do it on a group basis, and I'm going to share that with you very shortly as well. So, what I'd say as well as leaders is find time to energize as well before having conversations with the team. So, even with the team as well, it takes me back to the being honest and how we're feeling. So it's being honest with how we're feeling, even with the team. So I think people appreciate honesty. You are a leader, but you are human. You cannot be expected to be upbeat all of the time. And that's the thing with the ACT matrix is, I think from a very early age, we're trained to understand the positives and the negatives. And we see emotions as positives and negatives. And you'll see in the language that I'm using here with the ACT matrix, we're talking about it as either wanted or unwanted in that given context. In this case, it's about managing emotions in the workplace. It might be even you as an individual, you want to participate in coaching to develop those skills. And some of you even attending will have participated in an EI assessment, emotional intelligence. So really some of this is about understanding yourself better and developing your leadership skills. Okay, so now what we've got is we've got a sense of the ACT matrix. Now what we're going to do is we will move that up into the team as well. But just before we do, a note on workability. So the away and the towards moves, it is for you to decide that. What you want to do is thinking, is this behavior working for me? Is it helping me to move me in the direction I want to be? Is it helping me to move towards the leader I want to be? So really on that page, that what's important, what kind of leader do I want to be? And workability isn't about the judgments or being right and wrong. It's about noticing your actions and the consequences that follow. So when I feel these emotions, what do I do as a result? It is about learning how you respond to your emotions and then developing the psychological flexibility to do something else to move towards your chosen direction in terms of that leader. Again, what I have here is just an overview of that emotional intelligence assessment that I mentioned, that really looks at emotional intelligence in 15 different areas. And really what you get is a score on whether you have an oversupply, an undersupply, or an average supply. 15 facets in 4 factors: well-being, self-control, emotionality, and sociability. So I will send you a copy of these slides as well, and if you're interested in knowing a little bit more about the TQ and understanding your own emotions as a leader, please feel free to get in touch, even using that little link at the bottom of the screen to book your complimentary call. Okay, so here if we move to the pro-social matrix. The pro-social matrix is when we are using the concept of the ACT matrix, but we are now using it with more than one people, because the ACT matrix was used the leader as an individual. So let's have a conversation now about what might be important to the group and the team. So what's, I'll just change the group, maybe even here to the team. What's the team's shared purpose? So in terms of managing emotions in the workplace, what's important to the team in terms of managing those emotions, do you think? Again, using the chat box. Oh, Tori's gone. Thanks, Tori. Okay, so what do you think is important to the team in terms of managing emotions in the workplace? I think somebody in the chat box earlier used the word sensitive. I think in terms of managing emotions that they may also value openness and transparency, being valued and heard. Thank you. Okay, so being valued and heard. So contribution, I'm going to even say acknowledged. Okay, so if we want to manage the emotions in the workplace, what do you think is important to the team? Now, when I walk you through this pro-social matrix, this is what you could use with your teams to have the conversation about how people are feeling, because it provides a framework to do it in a safe way, because this is about noticing, it's not about judging. All the same principles of the ACT matrix are being applied here. So equal value in their contribution. So yeah, so equal value. Thank you, Gillian. So they want equal value placed on this. So they also may want compassion and empathy, for you to see things from their perspective. So they may also be looking for kindness. I can't type quick enough. Valued, heard, inspired. Thank you, Lisa. And that they are making a difference and acknowledged for their hard work. Brilliant. Thank you. And motivating. Also, what we talked about earlier for leaders, and I think equally important here as well, is teamwork. So what we've got here, well, I think the other one I'm going to add that have just come to mind as well is they want pride for themselves, pride to be part of the team, pride to be part of the workplace that they belong. So if we move over then into the bottom left then of the matrix, and let's just think about, what do you think is showing up for your team members that's unwanted at the moment? You can ask them the question using this matrix, but I'm asking you to tell me, what do you think is showing up in your team that may be unwanted and that's getting in the way of the shared purpose around the sensitive and openness and transparency and feeling valued? I'm going to start because Lisa tells us that she can't quite keep up with the typing. So I'm just going to jot down a few things to get us started. So I think equally your team will be feeling tired. They may also be feeling lonely and disconnected. They may be feeling depressed. They may also, like you, be feeling overwhelmed. They may also feel at times under attack. They may feel that they are being treated unfairly. They may be feeling project funding coming to an end and a little competitiveness. where that can be healthy, it can, for many, it can be feeling unwanted. And actually, Lisa, I'm just thinking the other thing that with that situation may also be is insecure. So those are some of the things even that Gillian talked about earlier, feeling insecure in terms of job security, for example. So here we have now some of the feelings that might be showing up. But if you want to manage emotions in the workplace, one of the things that, well, the other thing actually, now I'm just popping over to the bottom left, is what they want is managing emotions is the understanding, which will probably take us back to compassion and empathy. So we maybe don't need to repeat there. So they want you to understand. And if you're using this ACT matrix to ask them these questions, you'll be surprised how much people will enjoy you having the conversation and using the framework, being given an opportunity to talk about how they feel collectively as a team, because this is us as a team. Okay, so moving into the top left, what kind of behaviours or actions are you seeing from team members because they are feeling under threat, insecure, tired, lonely, disconnected, depressed, and overwhelmed? What might you be seeing or hearing from individuals within the team? So again, I'll get started while some of you start typing. So what we get is gossiping about people, venting frustrations with colleagues. So you remember earlier when we talked about workability, we talked about the consequences. For every internal experience, there will be an external consequence. And so when you see things, then you will understand the connection. So something's going on internally. When you see these things, it means you need to have a conversation. So gossiping and venting frustration, again, they will avoid people and conversations because of how they are feeling. So there may be fallouts and disagreements again within the team. There may be poor performance. We may, I suppose we may see or hear conflict. Raised voices. What else might what are you seeing or hearing? I'd love to know what you're seeing or hearing in terms of actions from your team that you know is coming from emotion. Ignoring others. Yeah, okay, so ignoring emails. Great, thank you. Ignoring emails or ignoring people. What else might you be seeing at the moment that's led you to come to this webinar this morning? Because you know that there is emotion going on. You're seeing and hearing snipey responses. Brilliant, thank you, Gillian. So, sorry, that was Lisa. Snipey responses, and Gillian is resistance. Everything. And I think when we understand that the resistance is because of emotion showing up, what we need to do is talk about what is showing up and have an understanding of that. So the idea of psychological flexibility and psychological safety is to experience what's going on in the bottom left of the matrix, to consider what is important in the bottom right, and to do then what is important. So not contributing to staff birthday collections. Okay, so not contributing. So I'm going to say not contributing because that could be in a whole lot of variety of situations. So we move over here then, let's talk about, well, as a team, what could you be doing as a team then? What do you think team members could do in terms of actions and behaviours that would move them closer towards what is important? So I'm going to get started again for you is create space to discuss emotions safely using the pro-social matrix. Okay. those people that I have helped with to learn how to use the pro-social matrix have found that the time they spent so valuable. In fact, the question at the end of the session from the team is generally, when are we going to do this again? So they find that really, really valuable. So other things might be, as a team, we might create strategies for supporting emotions in work. We might remind each other of support that is available. Team members might offer to listen to how people are feeling, is to be there, to be supportive. Because if we look at what's in the bottom right of the matrix, then the question is, what do team members need to do to be compassionate and empathetic and to be kind and motivating? And so some of the things is I think for team members, it's acknowledge the positive and discuss. So talking about the things that are going well as what's not going so well. So it's asking for the feedback and the positive stories within the team. I think also I talked about the emotional literacy with yourselves as leaders. So the emotional literacy within the team is helping them to understand their emotions. But using the pro-social matrix and sharing that helps people, and the ACT matrix, encouraging use of the ACT matrix, because the ACT matrix is them as an individual. It's about removing the stigma that we don't talk about emotions at work. It's healthy to talk about those emotions and to share those emotions. There are some examples. Anybody want to give me a few more examples of things that you might be doing that you believe are really great examples of managing emotions in the workplace? Feel free to include those in the chat box. I can come back to this slide. I'm conscious that we are just of time, so we've a few minutes left. And so what I'd like you to do is, moving forward from this webinar this morning, what I'd like you to do is look for opportunities to notice your own emotions and your response to them. So is to practice those emotions. So Gillian, name emotions without acting them out. So that's exactly what we want you to be doing, is looking for opportunities to notice your emotions. Notice what is showing up without feeling the need to act those out. Also is to look for opportunities and to notice how other people are showing up to their emotions. And to do that, you need to be fully present. So you need to be really listening and watching people, because we listen with our eyes and our ears. You'll have heard me say that before. 55% of what we say is through our non-verbal. So we need to try to, we don't maybe get all of that on Zoom or Teams or whatever virtual platform that we're using. But it's about really having that opportunity, noticing how people are showing up, asking people how they're feeling, and really wanting to hear. Notice how others respond to you. So being aware and developing that, and understanding how people maybe view you as leaders, what's working well for them and what they might need moving forward. So also, I think the key thing for you as a leader, and I think also as the team, and what's important, we could add that to the list as well, is the key thing is about being curious. Curiosity, why is that happening? Rather than, I wish they would stop that. Why is that happening? And having a conversation to understand that. Exploring why, trying to see things from the other person's perspective within the team. And really, even if you're being criticised as well by members of the team, is rather than being defensive, is to think about, well, what can I learn from this? So really asking the questions of the team. have a few more things just to highlight before we finish the webinar, but in terms of managing emotions in the workplace, I'm probably concluding that element of the webinar. There are just a few other things that I'd like to highlight in terms of future webinars and how to get in contact. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat box. If you have any feedback, just like I'm asking you to gain feedback from your team, please feel free to include them in the chat box. I'd love to hear whether you felt today was valuable. You've taken an hour out of your schedule to attend. I'd love to know how what feelings showed up for you in terms of the webinar and if it was useful. And while you're maybe using the chat box, what I'd like to do is to highlight the next webinar that I'm going to run is on Thursday, the 29th of April at 10 a.m. And this one's going to be on how to avoid burnout in the workplace. April is Stress Awareness Month, and I'm in contact with many organisations, and a lot of the research is pointing towards the issue around burnout. So I think it's a really important topic to cover. Thank you, Jillian. Really great. Glad that was useful for you. So if you'd like to attend the Avoiding Burnout in the Workplace, please feel free to save your spot. You can do that by getting in touch. Saving your spot will be on Crowdcast. That's the platform that you're on at the moment. So you're able to follow me on Crowdcast and get notification of all the other webinars that I'll be running. You can go there and save your spot immediately. Those of you that have joined today will be on my distribution list. I will send out next week an email letting everybody know that I'll be running that webinar and the link to join that. Those of you that would like to keep in touch, then please feel free to follow me on either Twitter or on LinkedIn. Alison, hello. Terrific. Thank you. I'm glad you could join us. Didn't know you were there. So please feel free to get in contact. Thank you for attending. Thank you for those that came for the first time round. Really great to hear from you guys that are regular attendees now. My aim is to provide you with the information that you need to enable your people and yourself to bring your best selves to work. If you'd like to get in contact, use book the 30-minute complimentary call as well. Don't forget that opportunity is there. And Stephen, great, and thank you for attending for the first time, and I'm glad you got some useful insights. Lisa, thank you as well. Have a great day, everybody, and continue to stay safe. All the best. Look forward to seeing you again.